Whatever. Doesn't do anything for me. Turn it off. I don't care. I don't care. I'm trying to avoid the news. I mean, look at this news. Mexico trying to stop Ebola entering from the United States. Obama has turned us into a third world country where the Mexican state government is conducting Ebola screenings of airplane and bus passengers from the United States, as well as illegal aliens who we've deported. They're screening them. But Obama won't screen anyone coming into America. Go figure. Go figure. Thanks to President Obama, the United States is now being treated like a disease-ridden third world banana republic. But you've heard this before, and you're used to it. That's why you're not voting on Tuesday. Perhaps you're one of the morons in the rain in San Francisco celebrating the Giants win, taking a child out of school. I mean, that's really preparing a child for a life ahead. Take a child in the rain now and celebrate with the parade in the rain in San Francisco. CDC pulls posters saying sneeze can spread Ebola. I mean, they're actually enemies of the people. They are. The white coats. The white coats are coming. Axe-wielding man tries to attack D.C. police officer. No description of the man. We assume that he is not a priest. We assume he is not a rabbi. Axe-wielding man tries to attack D.C. police officer. None of this interests me. Here's what we're going to talk about today. First of all, it's Open Mic to Mike Friday, which means any topic is fair game, okay? Here's the number, 855-407-282. Number two, we're going to have a notorious ex-gangster on in the next hour. I'm not going to tell you who it is. And I'm not going to tell you why we're having him on, but I guarantee you it'll be one of the most interesting interviews I've ever had. I want to talk about fast cars, Halloween gifts for kids at the front door, the latest news. And if you're a first-time voter, are you voting D or R and why? These are some interesting questions. I also want to talk about how depression has worked for me my whole life, or how I've worked depression and used it. It never destroyed me. I mean, I'm naturally a pessimistic person who is sort of optimistic. I don't know how to describe it. I'm fundamentally a very pessimistic person who has overcome my pessimism to be an optimist. I don't know if that makes sense. So, for example, the people are in the streets. I'm going to give you a little example. They're celebrating a sports team in the rain. All right, people will do that, I suppose. A, if they have no jobs. B, if they're moronic. And C, if they want their children to wind up as servants. They took their children out of school today to go in the rain. You hear this? So I look at that and I say, you know, this sports worship is nothing new. It goes back to primitive times. Everyone's always appreciated the gladiator, which then became the sportsman. The gladiator, of course. The sportsman was the gladiator in the ancient days. But even before that, I mean, there were sports, I suppose, before cutting off the heads of Christians and feeding them to the lions. Or was it the Greeks who introduced sports to watch the young men run around naked? I don't know. I don't know where the sports began. I think it was the Greeks introducing sports so that the old men could sit and watch the athletics in the state. But whatever, you get the picture. But one of my favorite poets, yep, you knew it would happen. I'd go from the low to the high, from the vulgar to the sublime. A Shropshire Lad by A.E. Housman. This is the first poem I ever heard that I loved. And I hate to use the word working class. That means nothing. What's working class? We all work. I was a kid who came from a sort of lower middle class poor family. There was no literature in my house. The Daily News, the New York Post, the Journal American, was the literature in my house. Maybe Life and Look magazine. If we really wanted to go upscale, I'd read Look magazine. There were no books in my house to speak of. So being an early college boy, I went to school with the typical attitudes of a poor kid, a chip on my shoulder like a ruffian. I thought poetry was for weaklings and fairies. And I went into the English class, and we had an English teacher. It was an older man, white hair, shocking blue eyes. I'll never forget his eyes. I could see his eyes as I close my eyes right now. And he read us a poem from A.E. Housman, who then became one of my favorite poets, called A Shropshire Lad. It's a short poem called An Athlete Dying Young. Let me read a few stanzas, okay? And this one struck me. Here I was, this ruffian kid, about an athlete who I think had died, struck me. From that day on, I realized certain things about myself that I had not known. All through this poem. The time you won your town the race, we cheered you through the marketplace. Man and boy stood cheering by, and home we brought you shoulder high. Today the road all runners come, shoulder high we bring you home. and set you at your threshold down, townsman of a stiller town, smart lad to slip betimes away from fields where glory does not stay. And early though the laurel grows, it withers quicker than the rose. Eyes the shady night has shut cannot see the record cut. And silence sounds no worse than cheers after earth has stopped the ears. Now you will not swell the rout of lads that wore their honors out, runners whom renown outran, and the name died before the man. So set before its echoes fade the fleet foot on the sill of shade, and hold to the low lintel up the still defended challenge cup. And round that early laureled head will flock to gaze the strengthless dead, and find unwithered on its curls the garland briefer than a girl's, a Shropshire lad to an athlete dying young. Most, I would say, mildly educated people know this poem. It's a very famous one. But the tragedy of the young boy dying struck me. I didn't quite know why it struck me. I really was moved by it. Then I came to read Hausman. I found out that he was a lifetime depressive, and he would celebrate his birthdays by wearing black to celebrate the day he was born. He was my kind of guy. He was a born talk show host of his time, but he was born well before Marconi, and so therefore he had to revert to poetry rather than rhetoric and baloney. So we're going to talk about Halloween now and get back to the basics so I don't lose my whole audience. I probably, out of an audience of millions, had around 1,200 people who like that. The other 50,000 a minute probably turned the show right off and went to some, I don't know what they went to. I have no idea. But this is the problem with radio. You don't know who's